Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show, where we learn about women's health and sexual wellness. Today we have a special guest with us, Gabrielle Hanson, and she is a politician actually here in the Franklin area, and has been doing a great job with that. Gabrielle, welcome.
Thank you. Good
And can you?
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Beautiful day here in Nashville. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your work and a bit of your background, and then we'll get into the conversation.
I am a realtor by profession. I've been in Tennessee a little over 12 years. Um, been doing real estate over 20 years in the greater Chicago area. And I'm a mom of one and a wife of one as well.
Well, you've got a lot of things going here in Franklin, and again, you had a tendency the past 6 months to stand up against the I guess you'd say our deep state here in Franklin. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was elected to be an alderman at large a few years ago, and I was the first set of non establishment eyes that got to peek behind the curtain. And what I saw was shocking, and it was corrupt, and it was not okay for the citizens of Franklin who'd been sold the Disneyland Bill of Goods about this conservative, Christian, family oriented community, but nothing could be farther from the truth. So I set out on a crusade to make sure that the PR campaign that was being put out there was exactly what the people were going to get. But I was met with mass resistance from those who were elected officials, local, county, state, even some national level, as well as local establishment who did not want to give in to giving up their corrupt ways, the cash flow, and the control and power.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it right there. And many of us supported you in the community, and we're very, saddened actually, and disappointed that we didn't get you as our next mayor. But as you said, I think there's a whole lot of resistance and a whole lot of corruption that's going on here. And I think that's pretty typical, of a lot of places around the United States right now. And our subject of particularly young women's health and sexual wellness, I think plays into that whole situation, because I think, and from my experience, a lot of this corruption, this political corruption, and societal and cultural corruption, is really, a lot of it is pointed in the direction of making it difficult, for especially girls and young women, but also young men as well, to have a chance at like what you and I have, of marriages and families that we developed. It appears that going forward in time, they're trying to, really kind of take that off of the norms list for these kids. One stat that you may or may not have heard is that they're predicting that by 2030, which 6 years from now, that 45% of our young women that are aged 25 to 44, so that'd be prime, reproductive age and prime working age, they're going to be single and childless. 45% of them. So, and again, you got a daughter. What are your thoughts about what you're seeing, in society, as far as, do you think that I'm on the right track with that, or do you think that?
I do. And in fact, although I'm in my late 50s, I have friends of all ages. So we'll start with this 19 to 23-year-old range, kind of a college age. They don't want to have kids because they see how hard life is.
Mhm.
And they're wise enough to realize bringing up a child in this world could be very, very hard. And I think that age group has become a more traditional focused age group as far as the women and even some of the young men are concerned.
Mhm.
Then you jump up into more the late 20s, the mid 30s, realizing they've made mistakes. They're still alone, but they're hooking up all the time. It's unfulfilling. They don't have children, or maybe sadly, some of them have actually had an abortion because they got pregnant by a guy that they knew wasn't going to be a decent father and made the wrong choice in a bad situation.
Mhm.
And then you see The next age group, I've got a girlfriend that's 43 who was so busy pursuing her career that she lost track of how old she was and where her life was really headed. And she was looking for Mr. Perfect to match her perfect career to live her perfect life. She's 43, doesn't have a boyfriend, doesn't have any children, and she's desperate. So, yes, I definitely think that between the pursuit of the hookup culture, between the ideas of pursuing a career and being successful, and then the fact that so many outside influences from food, toxins, medications render women challenged to become pregnant, I think we're going to see a lot of young ladies at childbearing age who want children and don't have them.
Yes, I completely agree. And we're seeing it already. We're seeing that about 30% right now are ending up unintentionally childless, is what they're calling it. And just what you described with your friend, there are one of your friends, they are going along and getting their degrees, and a lot of times it's advanced degrees as well. And they're told, they're told by society that this is the wise way to live. And then if they even start looking for a mate, it's in their late 20s, early 30s. And then again, they get to the point where, for one thing, now they're in their early 30s, maybe mid 30s, and the guys that that they knew earlier in their life, have some of them have married, and some of them just left the area or whatever, just aren't in the market, and they're 35 years old now, and 35 to 40. In some cases, they're competing with 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old, young women that for the same men. That you can see the problem with the dating pool possibilities. And then, but also at the same time, most of them don't know, very few of them know that women's peak fertility, and this is my area, this is the science and the biology. Women's peak fertility is age 19 to 29. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to have a child, into your 30s, especially up to about age 32. But from age 32 to 35, women lose about 50% of their fertility. And then from 35 to 40, it really, really drops down to near zero. So, and yeah, and then it's 30% of young women that this is happening to right now. And you're alluding to the fact it's probably going to be happening to more, with that statistic I said earlier, the 45%. Um, 80% of them want to have children. There's 10% or so out of them that can't have children for whatever reason. And then another 10% that don't want children, but that leaves you 80% that do. And so um, I think you're describing something that is already, to some degree, get fairly common, more than it should be. And then it's so tragic, because I think you can speak to this, but there's so much more to life than career success and all of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, most definitely. And I think so many of them wait for the right guy, or they wait for these particular milestones in their life. And in that process, they have very negative relationship experiences from these dalliances and hookups that it leaves them rather bitter. So it takes an extra long time and usually a lot of desperation for them to finally give into a guy who's actually a good partner and a quality partner after they've chiseled through the shell that they've created in
Mhm.
relationships because of their bad choices to hook up with strangers.
Yes, I couldn't agree more on that with you. That's been my experience because, again, we probably shared this before, but my background is with college. I taught college for 12 years at MTSU, actually, Middle Tennessee State University. And during that time period, I created a women's personal conditioning class, and then it became a women's wellness program there because I had a lot of sorority women in the class, and they wanted me to come, work with physically with them as far as like exercise and nutrition and that type of thing. And along the way, and getting my PhD around that, and I did it because I'd come across research showing that their state of health at that time, that it's the years that before that they get conceive and have a baby that really count as far as building the kind of body that will supply a baby with healthy nutrients, because the baby's literally using the young woman's muscles, bone, and fat to create themselves in the womb. But it is, you can't do it right there at the time that they're about ready to get pregnant and have the child. So it's the years leading up to it. And I was trying to get a multiplier effect, on the future generations by helping them help a young woman be healthy, and you're actually helping probably three people, maybe four, counting her husband, hopefully. So, but they shared the hookup culture, they shared their experiences, and just what you're describing. Uh, College was a nightmare for most of them, and then I interviewed quite a few of them after college, because I taught from 2005 to 2017, so 12 years, and then I got canceled because of this things I'm talking about. Um, but I interviewed several of them, 21 of them actually, and some of them weren't my students, but from about age 22 to 43, I think was the oldest, and they were, and again, all single. They were having experiences that you're describing exactly, and 19 of them hated hookup culture. Two of them seemed to be okay with it. They lived in the big cities, one in Boston, one in Atlanta, and they seemed to be sort of okay with it. Although one of them kind of, it was telling what she said. She said that guys, after they'd hooked up the night before, it was really sad because they wouldn't even acknowledge that they knew them the next day. They wouldn't have, they wouldn't even have breakfast with them or anything like that. And
Mm.
she plaintively said, she made a statement to me. She goes, they try to act like they don't remember us. And she goes, you're going to always remember the people you have had sex with, And I thought, wow, sex is a sacred thing, and for our society to have come down to where it is now, where these young people are told that this is a normal way of living, it's really, really gotten, as you said earlier, corrupt. And I just like to get your thoughts as well on, not that there's a direct connection necessarily to people, necessarily certain people, anybody that we're talking to here, but would you say, we're talking about here, would you say that what you've seen in politics as far as the corruption of the different things that go on, they certainly aren't against what we're talking about, right? They're not certainly not against the hookup culture and that type of thing. Would you say that there's some that they kind of goes together with the corruption of what's going on in government and business in some cases?
It is in any industry where you want to move up a food chain or a ladder. Same thing in Hollywood. It's kind of a foregone conclusion, particularly with the younger women. I don't think anybody's going to worry about hooking up with a 55, 58-year-old woman so much, maybe if they're 80. But most of them, they're taking advantage of these young women who they know are naive enough to believe that this is going to buy them a better spot, a better position, more clout, more power, and they do take advantage of it. And typically, those men are more mature than the young ladies. But in the case of Cameron Sexton's recent expose with someone that was working within the legislature, it was kind of a peer relationship, interestingly. But again, it was a power play. I don't think it was because anybody was in love with one another. It's a power play. It's sex is adrenaline, and it creates this adrenaline rush and this passion, and people get caught up in that, and they think, the women especially think they're going to get somewhere by giving up the most valuable possession they have, which is themselves. But typically they don't, and if they do, it's usually short lived.
Right. Oh yeah. Again, completely agreed. We've had, even in your world, you've had a lot of the similar experiences as far as what you've observed, and same thing in mine as far as the young women that I've dealt with, and young men. I mean, I had one young man out of all the years that I taught, that he was just brokenhearted by what had, by a young woman, the way that she had treated him. But I've had uh, dozens and dozens of young women that this has happened to, so and actually I've had conversations when the sororities came into the picture at Middle Tennessee State. um Sorority advisors, so they're not too far, out of being a sorority and girl themselves. but they're a few years out. They're maybe 25, 26, 27, 28, maybe 30. But we would sit down, in the room, and um, they would just bemoan the situation as far as the way they said, these girls let these guys treat them, so terribly, and we can't understand why. Evidently things have changed quite a bit, maybe in the last 10 or so years. This would be 15 years, maybe go back. So I think that this sexual anarchy, I call it, versus sexual integrity, this movement towards sexual anarchy seems to have picked up and accelerated, in the last, maybe since 2010, maybe forward. So what are your thoughts on that? Again, I think you mentioned earlier that I think there's some in this generation, and then we have some research on that too, that there's some, especially young women, that are saying enough is enough, and no, we're not going to do this anymore. But from my beginning teaching from 2005 to about 2010, things seemed fairly normal, and then from about 2010 forward, it seems like it's accelerated as far as um, the crudeness and the sexualization and the craziness too. I mean, it's gone into the whole, gender ideology and all that. What are your thoughts about that?
I think a lot of it starts with the conditioning in school with the textbooks and the exposure that they have, even in elementary school. When I hear parents of 12-year-olds, this was a good number of years ago, saying, yeah, they're given blowjobs at 12. I'm like, oh my word, it's shocking. How do they even know about this? It's because of what they're exposed to. And then they get desensitized and conditioned that the sex is normal, sex is okay, sex outside of marriage is the only way to go, and just as often with as many different people as you can. And they know that they're never fulfilled. So it's like continuing to eat food, trying to fulfill your hunger, but you can just keep on, and you're never going to be satisfied until you're satisfied with yourself and realize your own value. But the age limit is just shocking to me. And they see it in books, they see it in school, they see it on TikTok, they see it on are we dating the same guy? I mean, like, really, if you even have to be on that app asking, the answer is no, this is the wrong guy. Are you kidding? Have you seen those guys? Holy cow. I wouldn't even worry if the guy was dating somebody else. But really, if you have to ask that, that's a reflection on you and the person that you chose, because that's your intuition. In some cases, the Holy Spirit is saying, no, this is the wrong guy if you have to ask this question.
Right. You have a great way of putting it. But it is true. I mean, the things have gotten, as you're saying, as you're pointing out, things have gotten to such a ridiculous level compared to, again, my childhood and probably even your childhood and
Mhm.
teen years and early adulthood. Um, yeah, it's just gotten to a point where things are just ridiculous on many levels. And the thing is, a lot of these young people I don't think they realize how ridiculous they are. And yet, I did some research over at Middle Tennessee after I was canceled. Some of my fellow professors over there didn't like what had happened, and they had me, come in and research with their students. And I surveyed like 438 of them, so it's a pretty good sample size, and it came out really lopsided as far as what they desired. Questions were like, and they could agree, disagree, strongly agree, strongly disagree. They had like five different options to go with. But one of them was, I wish there was more hooking up in our society. And that one really went down in flames. It was a
Good.
very small percentage that agreed on any level with that. The following question, I was glad that I feel like God gave me this kind of intuition to do it this way. But the following question to that was, I wish there was more true love and romance in our society. And it was like 90, well, 85% they were in some level agreement with that. Maybe even more, 90%. So, and then I put another one about chivalry on there, and they heavily, I didn't even know if they know what chivalry was, but they were heavily in favor of those types of things. And then the other thing was, the kicker sort of was, I asked them, how many of them would want to be married in their future? And 97.48% said they wanted to be married. sometime in their future. This is, 2020, so it's been a few years back, but I don't think that much has changed. So there was a lot of hope in that. They also I had one open-ended question that said, is there anything that I haven't asked about that you'd like to that I should know? And there was a bunch of comments on there that I think speak to what we're saying here. One of them was people are scared to love. That's stuck in my mind. They're scared to love, and then there's a lot of other ones, along that same line that um, decrying the situation. And I guess what I'm saying is, I think that most of them know, and again, particularly the women, most of them know that this is going against what I call their sexual nature, because their sexual nature is to go in the direction that you were kind of alluding to, as far as finding somebody that you're serious with younger, being relative, not 18, not 17, but maybe early 20s and maybe to mid 20s, and getting on that pathway, going in the direction of a cornerstone type of marriage where you get together and marry this love of your life, and you build your life that way rather than trying to go for the capstone, with all your accomplishments all taken care of, that type of thing. So what do you think about that? As far as, do you think that the again, you've got a daughter, so I know her, and actually I've interviewed her, had
If
that.
you could only hear our conversations, what not to do. She listens to my two girlfriends who are younger than me, who made those mistakes. And a young girl doesn't always want to listen to her mom, but when she hears it from other people and sees the mistakes they've made, it really resonates. That I think it's a twofold problem. I think somehow the boys are not being raised in the art of wooing a woman.
Mhm.
About 20, 25 years ago, there was a fantastic article. I saved it on the art of wooing. And it was so amazing because it is an art and they've lost that chivalrous, how to capture a woman's heart, sweep her off of her feet. There is a technique, there is an art. And I think inside every woman, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that. And then that's why they want these magical proposals and the fairy tale wedding, because the wooing is the precursor to all of that. But they're not getting that. But the guys have no clue because the guys are not being trained and raised in that technique, because many come from a broken family and maybe their dads are hooking up too. So that's all they see. They don't have this unified home with a dad who swept the wife, his mom, off her feet. And the dad can go, okay, here's this special girl. Here's what you do to grab her heart and make her yours forever. And I think it's a twofold problem that we're dealing with.
Yeah, agreed, and that's really what we're working on here, and what I'm doing is I'm having the honor and the blessing to speak more and more on college campuses and to pro-life groups and that type of thing, and really coming to the conclusion of what you're saying there, that these young people need to be trained and taught these different life skills, and the young men, like you're saying, that they want to. I think in many cases they want to be that chivalrous gentleman that the young women are looking for. They don't really know how to, though, because, like you said, there's so many of them that don't have great role models, to look up to, and the young women, to your point, that people are telling them that they got to be sexually active, in order to get a guy. I literally, I think you mentioned parents. I literally, with two of the girls that I was working with, college women, one of them's dad and the other one's mom. So it's two different families we're talking about. But in both cases, their parents, dad and a mom, was telling them that they had to have sex with guys these days in order to get a
Oh,
guy to, yeah, to get a guy to, consider marrying him. And really, what the research shows is that's the opposite, because the
mhm.
guys are categorizing them, the ones that are interested in long term and marriage relationship, they're categorizing them right away into, if they're quote unquote easy, they go into the for a good time only bin, and if they're resistant, if they're practicing, if they're cherishing sex for marriage, let's put it that way, then they go into the possible marriage partner. So we got a kind of an opposite thing going on in our society, as far as what the scientific research shows and what the urban legends and even what parents are telling their children, to do. So, yeah, it's a mess that way. But what are your thoughts about? Do you think? What are your thoughts about fixing it? I want to ask you that. And again, the other thing is, do you think that the political world can have a role in fixing it?
I think the problem starts in the church, and we need more prevalence of a good, solid, strong church
Hmm.
voice in our world today. But in
Hmm.
the absence of that, which we don't have, it's got to start at home with parents who don't split up and then bring partners home to spend the night in front of their children to
Hmm.
think that this is normal, and the kids get involved with the parents' emotion when the mom's boyfriend breaks up and then hooks up with a neighbor down the street, or the mom moves the food chain up the neighborhood into a bigger and bigger house each time getting married or engaged. Um, I think the problem starts with adults who know better,
Hmm.
and women particularly who say, I have value. I have enough value that I'm not going to give away the most important thing that I have because you're not worth it until you're ready to make a commitment. And if
Hmm.
you're ready to make a commitment, then I know you're willing to probably stick it out with me, at least for a long time, if not a lifetime, in a committed relationship, because you've taken time to get to know me and love me as a person instead of just the fact that you're a great 1 hour pop in the sack.
Right.
And that's what is going on. The value system is skewed, and we've got to teach people the power of their own value, and that their value is not reflected off what somebody else thinks for an evening or 3 days or any kind of short interim. They have to know their own value and reflect that to every potential suitor that comes into their life.
Yeah. You got some real wisdom here. Thanks for sharing it with us today. Because, if you were so busy with politics, you would be a great counselor on all these things.
I
But
counsel a lot of girlfriends, let me tell you.
okay, well, I can tell. I can tell you've got some experience with it, and I can tell it's effective. So, yeah, I agree, and I agree with you on the church point as well. We've had my wife Jody and I have had some issues with some of the churches that we've gone to, as far as them not being willing to step into that role or really play the role that they were playing when we were young. They would, from the pulpit, they would be saying these things, and fairly regularly, so that has changed, and it's not been a good change over the years. So I want to ask you a few questions as we move here towards to finishing, just to ask every guest, and just again, just get your thoughts on it. What, in your view and experience, is most dangerous to young women in our current culture? What would you say?
Hmm, they're devaluing
Hmm.
their own thoughts that they are only worth the value of what someone sees on the outside, not what they are inside, whether they're smart, whether they're nice, whether they are a person who contributes to society. Are they a good citizen? But they just look at, are they beautiful? Are they a size 2? I think that's the biggest threat.
I agree. I agree. And I think that, again, I don't know if I mentioned this because I do so many of these days, but that's been one of the biggest things recently. That they had a study that showed, from a couple of years ago now, 57% of young women, teenagers, and going up into young adulthood, had the kind of self assessment that you're talking about. And again, I think the combination of everything we got going, the social media, just all of it, and the craziness that's going on with it, as you described so well, with the parents in some cases, no solidity, or very little
Yeah.
solidity for them to look at, and getting the impression that the only thing that counts is how they look, like you said. No depth and understanding of what it means to be a person, the importance of the person from the inside out, who they are as a person. All right, thank you on that. What do you see in the future for women's health and sexual wellness?
I think that if this pattern continues the way it is, regardless of whether we have the Gardasil shot or not, I think that women's significant health issues, infertility caused by sexual activity with multiple partners, sexually transmitted diseases that render them sterile or have cancer or other critical health issues, I think that alone will be enough to force a trending in the opposite direction, knowing that if they continue that behavior, whether they're young or older, it could ultimately cost them their life.
Right. And along that line, from 2015 forward, STIs, and they say, STDs, STIs well, they hit their highest level ever in 2015, and they just continue to rise every year since then. So they say that the level of sex, in general and in total is down. I think part of that may be because of porn, the influence of porn in our society. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, where that leads. But the ones that are having sex seem to be having it with a lot of different people. I think that's the most destructive situation, as you pointed out. So fi getting them helping them get on the pathway to that one special person, and then not being all used along the way, and not being all chipped away at, as you said earlier. So important. They caution against young women, especially getting married too young, because they'll point to studies and say, well, the most successful, marriages are those that are, of 28, 29, 30, whatever, into their 30s. But really the truth of it is that that's for the ones that have done what you've described, where they've cohabited, they've been around, they've had a lot of sex with a lot of different people. The ones that do wait until they're older actually are more successful that way. But they found the most successful group, particular for women, were from age 22 to 30, the ones that hadn't had any, sexual experience. They had not lived with anybody, and not had, random hookup sex with anybody. So the old school coming out, 22, 23, getting married at that age and not having, been with anybody but your husband, or, your husband, ideally, that actually is a great formula still to this very day.
It is.
The
Then there's no comparison.
Yeah,
And hopefully on either side. And
right.
that's part of the danger. And you don't realize that when you're young, but when you're older, you realize what that real danger is in having sex outside of marriage. Because
Yeah.
then the comparison sets in.
Exactly. And not to mention what you mentioned about the STIs, because gonorrhea, I've got a friend at Vanderbilt that's a researcher there. She's telling me that gonorrhea is close to being resistant to any kind of treatment. So, and
No.
yeah, and it's gone out
Well,
of syphilis. They stopped being able to recognize it because they had it almost eliminated 20 years ago, but now it's back up to epidemic,
well,
stages.
when they do the statistical information that everybody that's been with that person before is now having sex with you, that is a scary thought. That should be enough to shut it down, but it's just not.
Yeah, right now, but I think you're right. I think it's kind of like AIDS. I'm old enough to remember the AIDS epidemic and how it influenced things. That it kind of went in the direction you're describing. Last question, and then I'd just like to close with some thoughts on your mind. What specific things, and we kind of already addressed this a little bit. What specific things should we be attempting and accomplishing in order to create better health and sexual wellness for young women in the future? Any other things you haven't mentioned?
Probably more women need to make a concerted effort to share their heartaches of what's happened in their lives from engaging in this reckless behavior over an extended period of time, whether it's the significant health issues, whether it's infertility, and the true emotional pain and sometimes physical pain that it's caused them.
Mhm.
Because young girls really don't know, but if there was a campaign that shared that, I do feel like there would be more awareness and a little more hesitation from young ladies
Mhm.
acting in a round robin manner when it comes to sexual behavior.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what pops to mind is that can't remember the exact name of it probably, but something like a parent at 16 or something like that, mom at 16, and they found that was one of the most effective anti out of wedlock birth type thing. Just these young women watching that show, a lot of them got the message of what it was like, as far as actual parenting and that type of thing, of a little baby, that type of thing. So. Yeah, and again, you and I have actually spoken before, and really, you've given me some great ideas, and I would really like to be able to implement some of the things you've suggested as far as having a show like that, where you bring not so young women, but not
Mhm.
necessarily older women, but maybe in the 25 to 35, age group that and have been out there regrettably now on their side of it and would share, what has gone on. And now that I think about it, the interviews that I did, the 22 to 43-year-olds, I think there's quite a few of them that would be willing to do that. I mean, just as a
It
sample,
could be it could be a life changer for a lot of young ladies and young men as well. To hear these stories from real life and see the tears and the hurt that comes along with bad
Yeah.
lifestyle choices.
Yeah, and young women, need to realize, I actually wrote a second book recently. It's going to be coming out soon, and it's about women's sexual wellness. And young women particularly have this power, like the folks I'm working with, and I call it a superpower. Basically, they're the gatekeepers, of the whole sexual situation. So if they decide to go against the radical feminists and start, living life as a lady, so to speak, again, and the advantages that brings about. I always say that the guys, if the bar is this low for to get to sex, they'll slither over it. But if you got it
Mhm.
set this high, they'll find a way to live up to those
The
expectations. So
thrill of the hunt.
that's right, that's right. Any other? We're down on time. Any other last thoughts in about 30 seconds?
Mm, don't sell yourself short, young ladies. You're worth it. And never forget that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll end there on that high note. I appreciate so much you being part of this, and I really admire your wisdom and the advice you're giving. I'm gonna have to have you. It'd be great to have you come on with some of these young women and just have a round robin conversation.
Might bring my Kleenex when I do. Some of those stories will be really sad. They'll really pull at your heartstrings.
Yeah, well, we need that. We need a
Yeah, we
change.
do.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank
I
you, Joe.
appreciate.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye bye.